if you were offered the chance to have everything you've ever dreamed of: power, fame, love, and the adoration of millions. That's the choice I faced, and I took it. But I never imagined that being the most desired man in the world would come with a price so dark. It would turn my dream into a living nightmare. Ethan's day had started like any other, a monotonous routine of work and solitude. He lived in a small, cluttered apartment that seemed to mirror the unremarkable nature of his life. But that evening, everything changed. As he returned home, exhausted from another unfulfilling day, he noticed a crisp white envelope wedged under his door. It was peculiar: no name, no stamp, just a single word embossed on its surface: invitation. Curiosity nudged him to open it. Inside was a black card with silver lettering that read, "The world can be yours. Meet me tonight at room 210, Grand Lux Hotel." There was no explanation, no signature, just the cryptic message that felt both thrilling and absurd. Ethan almost dismissed it as a prank, but something about the card tugged at him. Against his better judgment, he decided to go. The Grand Lux Hotel was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. Its marble floors gleamed under grand chandeliers, and the air smelled faintly of money and exclusivity. Ethan's nerves fluttered as he approached room 210, wondering if he was about to make a fool of himself. When he knocked, the door opened immediately, as if the occupant had been expecting him. Inside, a man dressed in an immaculate black suit stood by the window, silhouetted against the city's dazzling skyline. "Ethan," the man said with a slight smile, his voice smooth and commanding, "I've been waiting for you." Ethan froze. How did this stranger know his name? The man introduced himself as Mr. Caldera and gestured for Ethan to sit. Despite his unease, Ethan obeyed, drawn in by the man's magnetic presence. Caldera wasted no time, explaining that he had an extraordinary opportunity for Ethan, a chance to transform his life completely. "Imagine," Caldera said, his piercing gaze locking onto Ethan's, "having the world at your feet. Fame, fortune, and the undying admiration of everyone you meet. All of it can be yours." Ethan scoffed, suspecting some elaborate scam. But then Caldera held up a wilted rose and, with a flick of his wrist, turned it into a glowing, golden bloom. Ethan's skepticism melted into awe. "This is just the beginning," Caldera said, sliding a contract toward him. "All you need to do is say yes." Ethan hesitated, torn between fear and the tantalizing allure of a new life. Little did he know, this decision would change everything, for better and for much, much worse. Ethan couldn't shake the image of the golden rose as he stared at the contract before him. His pulse raced, his instincts screaming at him to walk away, yet something about Mr. Caldera's presence held him captive. "What's the catch?" Ethan finally asked, his voice trembling. Caldera's expression remained serene. "There is no catch," he replied smoothly. "All I offer is the chance to unlock your true potential. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain." The words echoed in Ethan's mind, drowning out his doubts. He took the pen, hesitated for a brief moment, and signed his name. What followed was unlike anything Ethan could have imagined. Caldera produced a vial of shimmering, iridescent liquid and handed it to him. "Drink this," he instructed, his voice calm yet commanding. Ethan studied the vial, the liquid swirling like trapped stardust, before tipping it back and swallowing in one gulp. The taste was sweet and metallic, but within seconds, his body erupted in fiery pain. He collapsed to the floor, his vision blurred as his veins seemed to burn with molten energy. Just when he thought he couldn't take it any longer, the pain vanished, replaced by an intoxicating rush of euphoria. It was as if every nerve in his body had been awakened, every sense heightened. When Ethan finally stood and caught his reflection in the mirror, he gasped. His face, once ordinary and forgettable, now looked like it belonged on the cover of a magazine. His eyes sparkled with an otherworldly allure, his jawline sharp and defined. Even his posture had changed. He stood taller, more confident, radiating a charisma he had never known. He touched his face in disbelief, barely recognizing himself. The transformation wasn't just physical. As Ethan stepped out into the bustling streets, he noticed how people responded to him. Strangers turned their heads, unable to look away. Smiles lingered, compliments flowed, and an unfamiliar power surged within him. Ethan felt unstoppable, invincible. What he didn't realize was that this newfound magnetism was not a gift, it was the beginning of a curse he could never escape. Ethan's transformation quickly catapulted him into a world he never thought possible. Within days, his newfound charm opened doors that had always been firmly shut. He strolled into job interviews and left with offers before the meeting even began. Invitations to exclusive parties, events, and galas poured in from people he had never met, but who suddenly seemed desperate for his presence. Social media caught on to him almost immediately. A stranger had snapped a photo of him at a cafe, and within hours, it went viral. Comments ranged from admiration to obsession, with people dubbing him the man everyone wants. By the end of the week, Ethan had millions of followers hanging on his every post. Corporations began vying for his attention, offering him lucrative deals to endorse their products. A luxury watch company sent him a custom designed piece worth more than his entire year's salary. High end brands gifted him clothes, cars, and even vacation packages, all in the hopes he'd casually mention them online. Ethan's life transformed into a whirlwind of glamour and excitement. Strangers on the street would stop him just to ask for a picture or to shake his hand, their eyes brimming with awe. Even celebrities began reaching out, inviting him into their circles as if he were one of their own. Yet, as exhilarating as it was, Ethan began to notice strange patterns in how people treated him. Their admiration often teetered on the edge of obsession. A barista at his favorite coffee shop began memorizing his orders and leaving heartfelt notes on his cups. His neighbor, who had barely acknowledged him before, started leaving gifts at his door daily. People didn't just want to be around him, they craved him. Their smiles, once warm, now felt unnervingly intense, and their attention often bordered on invasive. Ethan told himself this was the price of fame, the inevitable result of being thrust into the spotlight. But deep down, a nagging unease began to grow. There was a strange, almost predatory hunger in people's eyes, and it left him questioning if his rise to global adoration was everything he had dreamed, or if it was something much more sinister. Ethan's glamorous new life began to feel less like a dream and more like a prison. The adoration of strangers, once thrilling, had become suffocating. Everywhere he went, people followed. At first, it was just the paparazzi, but soon it was everyday citizens with their phones out, desperate to capture even a fleeting moment of his presence. His home, once his sanctuary, was now surrounded day and night by hordes of fans. They shouted his name, begged for selfies, and even camped out on the sidewalk, holding signs professing their love. Ethan started hiring security to shield himself from the crowds, but no amount of protection could keep them away for long. The obsession of others began to manifest in even darker ways. One morning, Ethan woke to find his mailbox stuffed with letters. Some were harmless love notes, but others were chilling confessions of people claiming they couldn't live without him. One woman sent him a lock of her hair, promising to give him her soul. Another claimed she was destined to die for him and hinted she'd act on it if he didn't respond. Ethan tried to laugh it off, but the unease that had been gnawing at him grew impossible to ignore. Then came the dreams. Every night, he would find himself running through shadowy streets, hunted by faceless figures. Their voices echoed in his mind, whispering his name over and over, their tone a mix of reverence and desperation. The dreams felt too vivid to be dismissed as simple nightmares. Worse, they left him exhausted and paranoid. Ethan stopped sleeping and started questioning whether the people around him were truly his fans or something far more sinister. The breaking point came when Mr. Caldera reappeared, standing calmly in Ethan's living room as if he had always been there. "You're starting to see it now, aren't you?" he said, his voice smooth as ever. Ethan demanded answers, his voice shaking with anger and fear. Caldera revealed the truth. Ethan wasn't just admired, he was needed. The transformation had turned him into a beacon of desire, and that desire was driving people mad. They couldn't resist him, and eventually they would destroy themselves and him in the process. Ethan's world spiraled into chaos as Mr. Caldera's words began to manifest in horrifying ways. The obsession of those around him intensified to a terrifying degree. Fans who once clamored for a glimpse of him became feral in their need for his attention. They broke through his security measures, storming his home in mobs, tearing apart his belongings as if they believed touching something he owned would bring them closer to him. Social media, once a platform that celebrated him, transformed into a battlefield of deranged devotion, with people competing to prove they loved him the most. Ethan's every move was scrutinized, exaggerated, and warped by millions of eyes, each pair hungrier than the last. Ethan tried to escape, fleeing to a remote countryside villa in hopes of finding peace. But peace was no longer possible. Word of his location spread like wildfire, and within hours, the villa was surrounded by a relentless crowd. They chanted his name, cried, and begged him to come outside. When he didn't, they began clawing at the gates, their desperation devolving into violence. Ethan watched from a window, his heart pounding as he realized they weren't just there to see him. They needed him in a way that defied reason. Desperate, Ethan turned to Mr. Caldera for a way out. He confronted him in a dark, hidden office belonging to the shadowy organization Caldera seemed to represent. "Undo this," Ethan demanded, his voice breaking. "I didn't ask for any of this." Caldera only smiled, his expression unreadable. "But you did, Ethan. You signed the contract. You wanted to be desired, and that desire has consumed the world." Ethan begged, offering anything to reverse the curse, but Caldera's response was chilling. "The only way to end it is to end yourself. Your existence is the anchor of their obsession." Ethan was left with an impossible choice. As he stood on the rooftop of a skyscraper, the crowds below screamed his name, their voices echoing into the night. He glanced down at the contract in his hand, now faded and illegible, and realized there was no turning back. The question wasn't whether he could escape, but whether he could live with what he had unleashed, or whether he would end it all to save the world from himself.